I stepped into the house balancing a suitcase in one hand and a bag of New Year's gifts in the other. "Mums," I called. No answer. "Dad." Silence. The only sound was the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. Then I saw my grandmother. She was sitting perfectly straight beside the front window in her favorite blue cardigan, hands folded in her lap, smiling as though she'd been waiting there for hours. "Oh, Germaine," she said warmly, "you're finally home." I smiled back, confused. "Where is everyone?" She hesitated just long enough to make my stomach tighten. "I thought they left you a note." A single sheet of paper sat in the middle of the kitchen counter. I unfolded it. "Your dad, your sister, and I left for a New Year's cruise. You're staying with Grandma. We'll be back in 9 days. No apology. No explanation. No request. Just an assignment." For several seconds, I simply stared at the handwriting. My vacation days. My 12-hour drive home. The New Year's dinner I'd been looking forward to. Every plan I'd made had apparently been replaced without anyone thinking I deserved a phone call. Behind me, Grandma spoke gently. "Should we start supper?" I closed my eyes for a second before forcing a smile onto my face. "Of course," I said, "let's start." But even as I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket, one question kept echoing inside my head. How long had they planned this without telling me? My name is Germaine Carter, and for 33 years I believed being dependable was the same thing as being loved. Whenever someone in my family needed help, my phone rang first. If Dad's back hurt, I drove him to appointments. If my younger sister Vanessa needed someone to watch her dog, I rearranged my schedule. If Mom organized a family gathering, somehow I ended up cooking, cleaning, and staying behind afterward while everyone else relaxed. I told myself that was just what families did. As a pediatric occupational therapist, caring for people came naturally to me. I never imagined the people closest to me had begun seeing that kindness as something they could simply take. I had requested nearly 2 weeks off from work because Mom insisted this New Year's would be special. "We're finally all going to be together," she'd said over the phone weeks earlier. So I'd packed gifts for everyone. Instead, I found a house that felt abandoned. As Grandma and I unpacked groceries together, I noticed things that immediately felt wrong. Half the pantry shelves were nearly empty. Her weekly medication organizer hadn't been filled. 3 utility bills sat unopened beside the fruit bowl. Even stranger, several large envelopes from a law office rested neatly on the dining room table. I reached toward them. Grandma calmly shook her head. "Leave those there, dear." "You sure? They've waited this long." There was something unusual in her voice, not fear but patience. Later that evening, after we'd eaten homemade vegetable soup together and washed the dishes, I helped her settle into her favorite chair. Outside, fireworks were beginning to light up the winter sky. Inside, the house remained quiet. Grandma looked toward the glowing window before turning back to me. Her expression had changed. Soft, thoughtful, almost knowing. Then she asked a question that stopped me cold. "Germaine," she paused, "do you believe people eventually reveal who they really are?" I looked at Grandma for a moment before answering. "I'd like to believe they do," I said carefully. "Why do you ask?" She smiled, but it wasn't the cheerful smile she'd greeted me with earlier. "Because sometimes," she said softly, "people only show their true hearts after they think no one is watching." She stood with my help and headed toward her bedroom. "Good night, dear." "Good night, Grandma." I lay awake much longer than usual, replaying those words over and over. Something about this wasn't just a family misunderstanding. Something deeper had been building long before I walked through that front door. The next morning, our routine began naturally. I prepared oatmeal while Grandma made tea exactly the way she liked it. After breakfast, I checked her medications, organized them properly for the week, and scheduled reminders on my phone so nothing would be missed. "You've done all this before," Grandma observed. "It's what I do for work." "No," she replied with a smile. "I mean, you've always taken care of people." I laughed quietly. "I guess I have." By lunchtime, we'd cleaned the kitchen together. That afternoon, I helped her sort old family photographs she'd been meaning to organize for years. She pointed at one faded picture. "I remember this picnic." I smiled. "I was 6. You insisted everyone use the paper plates with the flowers." I laughed. "I actually remember that." Grandma chuckled. "You've always tried to make everyone happy." Her smile slowly faded. "You shouldn't have had to." The words caught me off guard. Over the next several days, I began noticing things I had never paid attention to before. Grandma hesitated every time she climbed the front steps. She had been skipping afternoon walks because no one had time to accompany her. Fresh groceries had become rare. Several household repairs had clearly been postponed for months. Yet every room contained expensive decorations Vanessa had insisted on buying. Appearance had mattered more than comfort. One afternoon, Grandma quietly admitted something that made my chest tighten. "The house has felt lonely." "You weren't alone," I said. She smiled sadly. "Being surrounded by people doesn't always mean you're being seen." I didn't know how to answer that. Instead, I squeezed her hand. Late that evening, my phone buzzed. Mom had sent a photo. Dad and Vanessa stood on the deck of a cruise ship wearing matching holiday outfits, tropical drinks in their hands. "Happy New Year." A second message appeared almost immediately. "Did you remember to lock the back door every night?" No greeting. No, "How's Grandma?" No, "How are you holding up?" Just another instruction. Before I could even put my phone down, another message arrived. This one was from Vanessa. "Don't forget to water my orchids every other day. They're expensive." I stared at the screen. Not one person had asked whether their 86-year-old mother and grandmother had eaten. Not one person had asked whether she needed a doctor. Not one person had even asked if we were okay. Grandma looked over from her knitting chair. "Bad news." I forced a smile. "Nothing important." She studied my face for a second. "You don't have to protect me from disappointment." I lowered my phone. "I just don't understand." "I know." She reached across the coffee table and gently patted my hand. "And that's exactly why you're different." The following afternoon, I decided to organize the stack of unopened mail on the dining room table. Most of it was routine. Utility statements, insurance notices, medical correspondence. Then I found several thick envelopes from an attorney's office, all addressed personally to Elena Carter. I picked one up. "Grandma." She looked over immediately. "Would you like me to file these away?" She slowly stood and walked toward me. Her eyes rested on the envelopes for a long moment before she gently took them from my hands. "No, dear." She placed them neatly back where they had been. "Those can wait." Her voice carried a quiet certainty that made me stop asking questions. That evening, after we'd finished dinner and watched the snow fall outside the living room window, Grandma broke the silence. Without looking at me, she quietly said, "Some decisions only become obvious when everyone leaves." I looked at her, but before I could ask what she meant, she simply continued watching the snow. And suddenly, I couldn't shake the feeling that those unopened envelopes had something to do with all of this. By day 6, the neighbors had started noticing me. That morning, I was helping Grandma down the front steps for a short walk when Mrs. Whittaker from across the street hurried over. "Germaine," she said, "I didn't know you were visiting." "Just for New Year's." Her eyes moved toward Grandma, then back to me. "So Diane stayed behind after all." I frowned. "Stayed behind?" Mrs. Whittaker's smile disappeared. At the neighborhood dinner, your mother said she wouldn't dream of leaving Alina alone over the holidays. Grandma's grip tightened slightly around my arm. Before I could respond, another neighbor joined us. Then Mr. Harris, an old family friend, crossed the street carrying a container of soup. I brought this for Diane, he said. She told everyone she'd spent the entire year caring for Alina and desperately needed some rest. He looked past me into the quiet house. Where is she? On a cruise, I said. The silence that followed felt louder than an argument. With my father and Vanessa, I added. They left Grandma here with me. Mr. Harris lowered the soup container. They told us the whole family would be home. Grandma gave a small, humorless smile. That is what Diane wanted everyone to believe. Inside, I finally asked the question I had been avoiding. Why didn't you correct them? Grandma lowered herself into her chair. Because lies become harder to maintain when nobody helps carry them. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. A man in a charcoal coat stood outside, holding a leather folder. Mrs. Alina Carter, he asked. I'm Mr. Lawson, we spoke before New Year's. Grandma invited him inside. He placed several documents on the dining table and quietly reviewed each page with her. I stayed in the kitchen, but I heard words like property, authority, and revised instructions. Grandma signed the final page. Less than 10 minutes after the attorney left, my phone began ringing. Mom. I let it ring. She called again. Then Dad. Then Vanessa. Finally, I answered. What happened? I asked. Mom ignored the question. Who was at the house? A visitor. What kind of visitor? Her voice had changed. The relaxed woman from the cruise photos was gone. Germaine, did your grandmother sign anything? I looked toward the dining room. Grandma had gathered the documents and placed them inside her writing desk. She turned the key, removed it, and slipped it into her cardigan pocket. Then she looked directly at me. They'll arrive before your family does. I barely slept that night. Mom's repeated phone calls had stopped sometime after midnight, but the silence that followed was even more unsettling. Whatever Grandma had signed, my family knew enough to panic. The next morning, the 9th and final day of their cruise, I woke to the smell of pancakes. Grandma was already in the kitchen. You should have waited for me, I said, hurrying over. She smiled. I made the batter, you can handle the flipping. I laughed. Deal. For the first time since I'd arrived, breakfast didn't feel heavy. We talked about ordinary things. My patients, her favorite books, the flowers she wanted to plant in the spring. The house no longer felt abandoned. It felt like home. That realization surprised me more than anything. After we finished eating, Grandma carried 2 cups of tea into the living room. Sit with me, she said. I settled onto the sofa beside her. There are some things you deserve to know. I listened quietly. A few months ago, she began, I asked an attorney to come see me. I looked at her. You did. She nodded. I'd begun noticing that people were becoming more interested in what I owned than how I was living. My heart sank. I didn't want to believe it at first. She folded her hands together. Your mother kept encouraging me to simplify my affairs. Meaning, transfer everything into her name while I was still alive. I stared at her. She actually asked you to do that. More than once. And Grandpa's investments. The house, the rental properties, my savings. She gave a small sigh. They all suddenly became urgent topics whenever your mother visited. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, the cruise. She nodded before I finished. It gave everyone exactly what they wanted. I frowned. I don't understand. They thought leaving me behind would pressure me into making a decision after they returned. Instead, she'd made one while they were gone. Grandma stood and walked toward the writing desk. She unlocked the drawer and removed a thick folder. The attorney prepared everything before New Year's. She handed me the first page. I simply needed certainty. Certainty. About people's hearts. She smiled gently. These 9 days answered every question I still had. I slowly looked through the documents. Everything had already been signed. Witnessed. Notarized. Filed. Nothing about it looked temporary. Grandma pointed to the final page. My attorney called this morning. I looked up. The revisions have officially been recorded. She folded the folder closed. They cannot be undone without my permission. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then my phone vibrated. Mom. I ignored it. Another call immediately followed. Dad. Then Vanessa. One after another. Voicemail notifications piled onto the screen. Finally, a text from Mom appeared. Call me immediately, this is urgent. Another arrived seconds later. Has anyone been to the house? Dad sent one next. Did your grandmother sign paperwork? Answer me. Then Vanessa. Stay out of this, Germaine, don't interfere. I looked up at Grandma. They knows. She nodded calmly. They've realized they're too late. The peaceful morning disappeared beneath a flood of calls. None of them asked how Grandma was feeling. None of them asked whether she'd eaten breakfast. Every question centered on paperwork. On visitors. On signatures. On documents. I finally silenced my phone. Grandma simply continued knitting. They're frightened, she said. Because of the estate. Knows. She looked directly at me. They're frightened because the consequences of their choices have finally caught up with them. An hour later, the sound of tires crunching across the driveway shattered the quiet. 3 car doors slammed almost at once. Footsteps rushed toward the front porch. The front door burst open so hard it struck the wall. Mom rushed inside first, still carrying Crew's luggage. Dad followed close behind. Vanessa hurried in after them, her face pale beneath her vacation tan. None of them greeted Grandma. None of them greeted me. Mom's eyes immediately searched the living room. She spotted the writing desk. Then she looked directly at Grandma. Her voice cracked with panic. Mom. She took one hesitant step forward. Please tell us you haven't signed anything. Grandma didn't answer immediately. She calmly folded her knitting and placed it on the table beside her chair. Then she looked at each of them in turn. I have, she said. The room fell silent. Mom's suitcase slipped from her hand and tipped onto its side. No, she whispered. No, you couldn't have. Dad stepped forward. Elena, let's all sit down and talk this through. We're talking now, Grandma replied evenly. Vanessa looked at me with narrowed eyes. What did you tell her? I met her stare. I didn't tell Grandma anything. You must have. I didn't. Grandma's voice cut through the room. Germaine didn't need to say a single word. At that moment, another knock sounded at the front door. I'll get it, I said. When I opened it, Mr. Lawson, Grandma's attorney, stood on the porch holding a leather briefcase. Good afternoon, Mrs. Carter, he said politely. I believe everyone's here. They are, Grandma replied. Please come in. He placed his briefcase on the dining table and removed several neatly organized folders. As requested, Mrs. Carter, I'll explain the changes. Mom's face had turned white. There don't need to be any changes, she said quickly. This is all one big misunderstanding. The attorney opened the file. Mrs. Elena Carter has executed a revised estate plan. He looked around the room before continuing. The revised documents prioritize Mrs. Carter's long-term care above all else. Dad interrupted. We've always cared about Mom. Grandma slowly raised an eyebrow. Have you? No one answered. The attorney continued. Mrs. Carter has also appointed her granddaughter, Germaine Carter, as the individual responsible for overseeing her future medical and financial decisions should assistance ever become necessary. Vanessa let out a sharp laugh. That's ridiculous. Grandma looked directly at her. Is it? Mom stepped closer. Germaine manipulated you. For the first time since they'd walked in, I spoke. I spent 9 days making sure Grandma ate, took her medication, kept her appointments, and wasn't alone. I looked at my mother. You spent 9 days on a cruise. Mom's mouth opened, but no words came out. Mr. Lawson quietly resumed. The remaining estate has also been redistributed according to Mrs. Carter's written instructions. Dad's shoulders stiffened. What does that mean? It means, Grandma answered herself, that people who treated me like a responsibility instead of a person will no longer benefit from pretending they cared. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We just needed a break. Grandma nodded. A break from what? Silence. You told the neighbors you had spent the entire year taking care of me. Mom looked away. You let everyone believe you sacrificed for me. Another silence. You left me with an almost empty pantry. You left my medications unfinished. You left unpaid bills on my table. And you left without asking whether your own daughter even agreed to stay. Every sentence landed harder than the one before it. Finally, Grandma turned toward me. Did you complain even once? I shook my head. No. Did you ever make me feel like I was interrupting your life? No. She smiled warmly. You simply loved me. Vanessa crossed her arms. So that's it, we lose everything over one vacation. Grandma's expression hardened. No. She leaned forward. You didn't lose my trust during one vacation. You lost it over years. The vacation merely removed the last excuse. No one spoke. There was nothing left to argue. Over the following weeks, the truth spread through our extended family. The neighbors shared what they had witnessed. Mr. Lawson confirmed the timeline whenever necessary. Even the household records showed exactly when the medications had stopped being organized and when the bills had been neglected. Mom's version of events collapsed. The story she'd carefully built, that she had devoted herself to caring for Grandma, simply couldn't survive the facts. Relatives who had once admired her began asking difficult questions. Dad became quieter with every family gathering. Vanessa stopped insisting she'd been treated unfairly after realizing almost no one believed her anymore. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one apologizing to keep the peace. I simply stopped accepting blame that wasn't mine. A month later, Grandma invited me to sit with her on the back porch. I've been thinking, she said. About what? This house. I smiled. It's beautiful. It doesn't feel lonely anymore. She reached for my hand. I'd like you to live here. I looked at her in surprise. Not because I need a caretaker. She squeezed my fingers. Because I want family. Tears filled my eyes. I'd love that. So I moved in, not out of obligation but by choice. Months passed. The pantry stayed full. The medications stayed organized. The holidays became filled with laughter instead of guilt. Neighbors dropped by for coffee. Grandma smiled more than she had in years. As for me, I finally understood something I should have learned long ago. Being dependable is a beautiful quality. Being taken for granted is not. I stopped measuring my worth by how much I could sacrifice for people who never appreciated it. Instead, I chose the people who chose me. The New Year's table we set together the following winter wasn't the largest our family had ever shared. But it was the warmest. Grandma looked across at me, smiled, and raised her glass. And in that quiet moment, I realized my family had left me behind for 9 days, but those same 9 days gave me the one home where I would never be abandoned again.